Welcome, everyone. This is episode 393 for the week of June 29th. We are rounding out the first half of the year of 2025 for the Enough to Keep Going podcast. I am your host, DBQ Hams, and I am just chuckling along tonight. I am laughing because as Game Logic spools up our intro music, my dogs come running down because they know it's podcast time. They're right there. They're like, okay, we're gonna sit in the chair. We're gonna hang out by you. So I got suddenly 30 seconds ago, I had two dogs jumping at me like it is podcast time. Let's go. So yes, let's go tonight. I am your host, DBQ Hams. I am glad to be back, and joining us tonight is Game Logic. Wait a minute, Game Logic. You are using a different handle than last week. Are we just alternating back and forth, or what is going on? Game Logic, talk about your handle here.
I may not talk about it too long. I'm soul searching, hand wringing, and agonizing. Admittedly, part of my thought that I would be flipping handles was because I worry that many in the gaming conversation are staunchly fixated in their tribes and camps and are unwilling to listen to a diversity of thought and other opinions. And so I just sometimes often feel like there's no point or use or value in the expenditure of the energy in trying to give an opinion that's, we've talked for years on this podcast how Tau works in the hardware deployment sysadmin, higher level than sysadmin, but configuration management and site reliability engineering, and like in that kind of a space, right? And brings that kind of a mindset, as well as having kind of a hobbyist expertise in legal matters, and I work in software engineering and finance and systems engineering, and you come at it from an academic perspective, right, with a background in economics as well. And so we've often talked about bringing that type of thought right into this space.
Actually, it's a nice mix of people, right? Like,
yeah,
the benefit of this.
And as you guys have often counseled me, like the moment I am like 2 millimeters outside of the boundaries of this podcast, like I run into opinions that are firmly platform centric, right? And that makes it difficult, right, to have a conversation about gaming that is decoupled from platforms. But I like I said, I've been hand wringing and twisting my fingers about kind of what content I would cover, and like some other projects and things that I would work on, and kind of finally got my head wrapped around like the structure of like what some things would do that would be firmly rooted in like the creative aspects and the design aspects of games, and not in the financial, legal, economic, technical, software engineering, systems engineering, process kind of space. And so I kind of had that epiphany like over the last, I don't know, week or so, and so I flipped handles back. So we'll, and it continues to be a struggle.
Welcome back to the fold, Game Logic. And no matter where you find your identity, we are glad to have your voice, and that is the most important thing. So, speaking of voice, let's talk about your voice related to the game that pulled you back into the console space in terms of a PS5 Pro, and that is this week's big release with Death Stranding 2.
Yeah, and I haven't captured any footage yet because much kind of like Claire Obscure Expedition 33, it is one of those games that like everything is a spoiler, right? In just terms of like how the story unfolds. But it is I think first of all, the thing to mention just right off the bat, it is a incredibly gorgeous looking game. Same feeling that I had when I hit Death Stranding, the first one in 2019. Well, it probably took me longer to get around to that too. I don't think I played that game at launch. So maybe I played it when it showed up on Windows, I guess maybe, which I think was in 2020. But at the time when I saw it, it was like one of the most gorgeous games I'd ever seen, and that is the case here as well. On the PlayStation 5 Pro, it is just absolutely floor dropping amazing. I did not realize initially that it had a photo mode, um, and so I took a lot of like screenshots and stuff, just kind of using some other like crowbar mechanical means, and then I finally realized that it did have a photo mode, and which you would think because the game is so gorgeous, and I've been taking screenshot after screenshot after screenshot, and that kind of maybe takes us to the first point where I might have a bit of a detraction from the game. Um, the game is really good in onboarding and teaching you, and is really good in kind of the wiki that it has embedded in the game. Um, it is better, I find, than the wiki that was in Starfield, which is probably the only other game that I've spent an extensive amount of time rooting around in the wiki.
Yeah, and it was significant, but also not necessarily comprehensive.
Yes, and didn't necessarily kind of breadcrumb trail you to like getting at the things that you would miss in tutorials if you weren't mainlining the campaign.
That's a really good point, right? Like
Yep.
it's yep.
And so this game, it's near completeness almost hurts it, because there are definitely things that I had to go off into Google land and look up. And you could choose to say that's well because you didn't complete the first game, and so there's things you would have learned, or you haven't played the first game in a while, and so there's things you've forgotten. Maybe the truth is somewhere between like those 2 points, but it's also triangulated by the fact that there are things that that aren't fully entirely covered in the wiki, and some things that are maybe left out, and maybe that's because there's a thought that you are coming from the first game and you're accustomed to those paradigms. Um, in some cases, it's a matter of it's explained to you, but there's just like a skosh left off. And so one of the things, for instance, is timefall shelters. Um, you're briefed on timefall shelters, and the guy tells you. And I did play probably 16 hours of the first game. I didn't complete it. I probably got to maybe nearly 50%. But I also haven't
farther than I did. So
yeah.
Yep.
But I also haven't played it in a very long time, so I didn't do anything like going back to the first game to kind of brush up and retrain myself, right? So timefall shelters is a good thing. You're briefed on it, you're taught about it. I'll talk a little bit in about this when we talk about Shin Megami Tensei as well. I'm being a little more attentive to games and like reading through the tutorials and not just skipping them and not leaning so much on my curmudgeonly approach that like, well, if I can't figure out it and it's unintuitive, then that's your fault, right? um, but you're taught these things about the timefall shelters, and it tells you that you can leave your cargo there underneath the timefall shelter. And so I'm gearing up for this battle, for this fight against the BTs. And I've been through one other combat sequence beforehand where I had all my gear, right? And I'm like, oh, this is great. I'll be able to set up a timefall shelter. I'll be able to duff like all of this crap that I'm carrying that I don't need and just carry all my combat outfitting, right? Go fight the BTs and then come back to this timefall shelter and pick everything up. Well, I set up the timefall shelter and I'm looking for like the control panel that is similar to like a post box, right? That opens up some type of container and allows me to put my stuff in it. But that's not what a timefall shelter has. You're literally just supposed to doff all of your stuff and just leave it right underneath the timefall shelter out in the open. Um, so I had to Google and figure that out, right? I had kind of figured it out on my own and kind of had experimented with it, but then before I just walked away from all my gear standing out in the open, I wanted to confirm it, right? Then there's another thing where going into this fight with BTs, I set up a nearby watchtower because I'd read that watchtowers could detect BTs. So when I deployed from the base to go out on this mission, the person had advised me, hey, take a PCC with you so that you could set up a timefall shelter. And I thought very highly of myself and was like, okay, well, I'm not going to just take one PCC. I'm going to take two PCCs because I'm going to set up both a timefall shelter and a watchtower because I'm going to detect these BTs before I go in. But of course, you erect the watchtower. I raised the periscope camera all the way up to maximum height. I'm scanning around for the BTs, and I'm like, and I had used a watchtower before to look for bandits, and BTs were not appearing on the camera scope in the same way that the bandits had. So I'm like, what is going on here? Like, why this? Like, supposedly watchtowers detect BTs, right? Like, and of course, I had to Google and wiki and look up some things, and still at the end of the day, I didn't really come up with a definitive answer. So I just had to decide on my own without actually reading it in text. I'd found pieces of an answer, but basically I said, okay, so I'm not actually going to find the BTs themselves. I'm just going to be able to see the strands on the camera and pick them out against the skyline and then put markers on them. But so there's a matter of incompleteness, right? But then let me talk a little bit about the world building and lore, and also how this game hooks me because it has so many of the metas that I get giddy about, right, in games. As you know, talking to me through the years, I love outpost takedowns, and going back to like Far Cry 5.
Yeah, your Far Cry love is very much so.
And so I love overland navigation. I love like figuring this thing out, plotting it, like weaving complex plans, like putting things together and then executing, right? So that started all the way back at this base where I struck out on this mission. Like I said, I decided I was going to take two PCCs. I planned the overland route, and I planned the overland route deliberately, like not along the lines of like the default that I thought that they expected me to do. There was a very sharp cliff on my left, so I didn't take that route. But I didn't also go straight at this area where the BTs were supposed to be. So I kind of cut a line in the middle. And then I decided I wanted to attack this outpost from the west because the place I was supposed to go to after I left this BT threat area was further west. So I was like, well, I'm not going to come. This scenario is probably set up for me to encounter a lot of resistance if I go in this default direction and take it from the south or the east. So I'm going to go to the west. So I actually plotted my overland route to cut this slice in between, hook a left to the west, come back around, and like I said, approach it from the west. I set up my timefall shelter. I then set up this additional watchtower. I left all my stuff after it. I found another blood grenade because they only had like 3 where they were where I left the base, and then I looked on the camera. I plotted these 4 points. There are 8 strands in the area, so I'm figuring this thing out, plotting this thing out. I'm like, okay, I can only mark 4 of these. I can't mark 8 because you have a limited number of markers from the watchtower. So I'm like, I'm gonna like sequentially take out these 4 strands with the blood grenades, and then I'm gonna come back, right, rest up, recuperate underneath the timefall shelter, go back to the watchtower, mark these other 4 strands, and then go back out again. So like that whole thing, I love. And similar to when I took down the bandit camp beforehand, I was like, okay, decision point, am I going to actually do an outpost takedown and take all of these guys out, or am I going to just go in, get what I absolutely have to, and then try and evade and use stealth and get out? So my plan had been to just avoid as many of them as possible and go in and get what I needed. But as I was trying to cross a river, one of them spotted me. So it was actually super interesting. It was long distance. He was coming at me. So he spotted me, but he couldn't see where I had ducked off to. I was crouched behind this rock, and kind of as he came towards me, I kind of circled around behind this rock. So he never got an eye on me. And I had my assault rifle armed. And I was like, so I don't know at what range these other guys can hear when I pop this assault rifle. So I grabbed my strand, which I loved in the first game, using in the first game. And I had taken the one guy out before using the same tactic. This time, I crouched behind the rock until the guy came off of alert, started kind of heading back, and then I stuck up behind the rock and then took him down with the strand, right, and knocked him out. And then funny thing happened right on the way to the grocery store. I crossed the river and I'm sneaking up behind another guy with a strand. I had completely missed this one other guy. So another guy had been on the shore, closer to the beach, right on this other side of the riverbed. I had passed right by him and had missed him. Um, so I could, as I'm sneaking up on the other guy, I hear these footsteps. I'm like, what is? And then I look over and I'm like, crap, I missed a guy. And so I'm crouched down. There's no tall brush nearby, and I'm thinking if I try and head for like a hideout, like this guy might see me. So I'm doing the T-Rex thing. I'm like, if I just don't move, maybe he'll just look right past me, or he won't look at me. He looked right at me. So
can I ask?
Absolutely.
Are the enemies spawned as an instance? I mean, are they? Is it consistent no matter when you come back to that, or is it, like if you clear that guy out, is he not going to be back there the next time you come back?
So I don't know if you backtrack, right? If you do like a save and then come back later, I think that they are done. When I approached the base, it took me a while to figure it out because I don't think there was anything in the game that taught me this or that I found. When I approached the base and used the watchtower, it tells you how many bad guys there are at the base. So there's a little thing on your HUD that says, that tells you 6 of 6. And as you take each one out, right, it decrements.
Yep, that's helpful then. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so it's great. Like everything about the game is great. I love the, I love the hiking aspect. I love the isolation aspect, the loneliness aspect. The musical score to this game is amazing. And I mean many of like the pop folk songs that are kind of woven into the soundtrack like really hit or really perfectly aligned thematically to like that given scene that you're going through. Not every single one, but a lot of them are. But the orchestral soundtrack is amazing. Like just full of complete like superhero movie, big sci-fi movie, sci-fi opera kind of overture moments and fanfares and what I would say, and big long kind of sweeping segments, right, and movements in the orchestra. So it's amazing. I'm having a great time. I've put about 4 hours in so far. I'm definitely looking to do some more. I'm not trying to hurry through the game. I'm proceeding through the game in a very kind of methodical, exacting pace. There are aspects of it I'm kind of mainlining, but like I'm not in a rush. I think the last thing I'll mention is the social aspect, which we talked a lot about in the first game.
Yeah, right. With all the like, helping out in terms of your package deliveries and bridge building and all those other pieces.
Yeah, and I'll say in the first game, that was very much kind of ancillary content. Like I wasn't really wrapped around the axle about participating in that. I guess with this game, since I jumped on board like day one, I am a little more attentive to that. I have made some strand contracts with other people. It's really weird. I found, on one transit I went very vertical right over this ridge, because again I was on the approach to the bandits and I was like, okay, this is not a direction they would expect me to come from. And as I'm going up this vertical, I find a cable anchor, right, with a strand rope attached to it. I'm like, oh, that's awfully nice, somebody left that here. So I take it up. The cable, those things are 30 meters long, right? So they eventually run out. And then I go another 30 meters up, and I was like, okay, well, I'll do the same thing. I'll plant another one here. Now the next person who comes along will have 2, so they can get up the entire side of the mountain. So when I came back to the game later in a game save, apparently a guy had given me like 132 likes for that one strand. And I'm like, and then I looked at it, I dig through you have this thing called I forget exactly what it's called, but it's like the Strand Social something or other. It's called the SSS. But it's where all of like your messages and you can get back through your likes and all that kind of stuff. All your pictures and stuff from the game are. So I went in there and I saw that the guy had left me 132 likes, and then I looked at the guy's profile, and the guy is like, he's like a, I forget what it's called, like a seasoned or a veteran porter or whatever, or he's he's levels and levels and levels beyond, like 10
Logged
levels past
lots
that.
of hours
Yeah.
into Death Stranding and its universe. Yeah.
Now I bought the game on day one. So I mean, as far as people playing it in regular access, I should be kind of right alongside with other people, unless except for the people who put in like a ton more time. So I'm like, this guy must have been playing since early access. I'm like, and I guess, and he must have been past this point in the story. So I guess he's maybe finished the story and he's now like coming back to like see things other people had left and is like hyping people up.
Right,
Like,
but appreciating also where you place something versus like, yes, this is strategic on this cliff in order to get up here. Yeah.
yeah, so it's pretty amazing from a, again, we've talked about this a lot when we've talked about kind of Destiny, how there's kind of like this silent social culture right around the game that in a lot of ways gets conveyed through the unspoken word. And so it is yet again kind of amazing how the game is having that effect, and seeing, and I think what I'm seeing is how when the first game was there, people didn't get it. And I mean, there were definitely people who participated, but I think there are more people participating with the social aspects of the game at a larger scale than did the first time, because I think more people like grasp the point of it this time around. So it's gonna be interesting, right, as I go through the rest of the campaign, kind of seeing how those things work themselves out.
Yeah, there's definitely a greater awareness of kind of the mechanics and this kind of subgenre of Kojima style games than it was the first time. Like there was a lot of conversation around the first one of like, what is this? And now it is not necessarily what it is, but like how is it an evolution of what we've seen? And I think you're addressing some of that, which is kind of exciting actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think this game will benefit this time around. I talked about it on another podcast this weekend. I think this game will benefit this time around from the less cagey, like veiled in mystification, like avant-garde auteur,
Yeah.
marketing campaign
Yeah,
of
that
the
was very much the
Kojima
first
brain
one, right?
chip.
Of like you only know what it is until you play it. Like there was no transparency around it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they've done a little bit better job of that this time, and I think it will pay dividends for them. I think I I hear I hear there's a lot less stubbornness, right, and unwillingness to acknowledge that it's a good game, right? Whereas like the first time around, I felt like it was the marketing campaign and the buzz and the word around this is like just way funky. Like, and I'm not biting until right it becomes a little more transparent. But then on top of that, then there was like, oh, it's just a walking simulator kind of people, right? Whereas this time around, I feel like it's a lot less. It's much more overt that like this is a thing that you should play, right? Particularly if you're on the PlayStation platform. And the people who were against the game, who yay verily like have actually played it, right, now that it has shown up on other platforms, and have still come away from it without it hitting them. Those people are still right in their camps, and that's fine, and that makes sense. But there's less of a field of uncertainty right in the market, and so I think that's allowing people to kind of approach this game a little more willingly this time.
I think that's a really good point. Like there is a little more awareness, even if it's not completely transparent, but there's definitely kind of awareness of what you're getting into versus the first one. And I think time is the fact that this has been what almost 5 years because the first one was fall of 2020. We were very much in a COVID lockdown
Well,
type of mindset.
the first one first landed on PlayStation in fall of 2019.
Okay, yeah,
Yep.
yep. Wow, yeah. So yeah, definitely significant in terms of its of where it's at within its kind of place within the industry and our gaming expectations. So one more final question before we move on to it is: so you picked up a PS5 Pro in part because this game was on your radar. How does it feel within a Pro? Does it feel like you're seeing any of those benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I think the basic experience of a PS5 Pro, much like it was for the PS4 Pro, is you just have a sense and a realization that I do believe is objective that the PS5 Pro is not hauling as many stone tablets on a sled to make this thing go, right? It it's rendering at 4K 60. It's not doing a bunch of huffing and puffing to get that done. It still has overhead incapability, right, to pull some of these things off. A minor thing, which has nothing, I don't think has anything to do with the game. It may have to do with the fact that I originally had my PlayStation 5 Pro vertically mounted. Maybe I wasn't giving as much exhaust room before it was hitting like the side panel of a PC that it's sitting next to. Weird thing is that because I mentioned I got the Pulse Elite headset, which has a dongle, right, that goes.
Yep.
Now it has to go in the back of the PS5 Pro because the PS5 Pro doesn't have USB-A ports in the front. And for some reason, that thing just kind of randomly disconnects every few times that I use the PS5 Pro, and then I have to get up, reach around behind the PS5 Pro, pull it out, right, and reinsert it, and then go through the whole connection procedure again, right, between the dongle and the headset, which is a minor inconvenience. Although, like I said, the main thing that confounds me is what bothers me is I don't know why it's happening. Maybe it happens more with Death Stranding 2, so maybe it had something to do with heat and exhaust. Maybe it was that hot air was swirling around the back plane of the PS5 Pro, and when that dongle was heating up, it was becoming unstable. I don't know, but that's a, like I said, it's a minor thing, but yeah, I'm not in the mode of this is not the Xbox One Scorpio and the PS4 Pro. I am not going off and Googling and pulling the specific deltas between, what modes are available on PS5 and what modes are available on PS5 Pro. I just know that my options are unlimited. Right on the PS5 Pro, that's all I really care about. I am playing in quality mode, and I at 4K. So it's doing well.
Nice. All right. Well, let's jump ahead to our news stories for the week. Game Logic, you start us off here with one coming from PC Gamer around the 25th anniversary of Deus Ex.
Yeah, and we've got 4 news stories in the rundown. So if at any point you want to do one of these, just let me know. This news story over on PC Gamer by Joshua Wolins. Deus Ex lead Warren Spector pops up to remind everyone he didn't make the game alone in a cave. Wish you a happy 25th anniversary and get me wondering if something Deus Ex related is happening behind the scenes. The man forever fated to be known as the creator of Deus Ex would like you to know that he did not in fact create Deus Ex, not single-handedly anyway. In a video marking the 25th anniversary of the first Deus Ex, Warren Spector emerged from his hermitage to wish everyone a very merry what a shame. I'm pleased and proud because, like every developer, I hope to make something that lives on in people's minds for long. I never expected or even dared to hope that Deus Ex would be so long-lasting, yet here we are. Now, Spector, if I'm not mistaken, it doesn't say it in this article, but I believe his new gig is Thick as Thieves, which was shown during the Summer Game Fest. And so there's no mention of that in this article, but there is speculation about whether or not anything is going on with Deus Ex. It is obviously a game that is probably due, would benefit from a remaster. Whether or not that would come out kind of like the, I want to say Silent Hill, but that's not what I'm thinking of. What was the game that just came out last week? System Shock. It could come out like System Shock 2 remaster, right? Which wasn't new models.
Deus Ex remaster and all the kind of systems within that would be really interesting to see who would tackle that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, particularly that, that game kind of, I think that game kind of heavily leaned on aspects of System Shock 2, and then I think fed into a lot of kind of immersive sims going forward, and
Oh,
kind of
very much so, right? Like
yeah.
the idea of where the immersive sim comes from is rooted in the original Deus Ex. And so what a modern take on that would look like in terms of kind of spinning up that engine versus simply just remastering the graphics could be really interesting.
Yeah. So, I don't know if Deus Ex is coming back. It would actually surprise me if the original got uproused and it wasn't something like not the second one was it the second one Invisible War? And
Invisible
then
War, yeah.
and then I
Yep,
can't
which is
remember what
also on console and PC.
yeah, and then the third one had a new protagonist, and that is the one that I feel like is still pretty popular today. And I would think that one would get more of a buff up because
That's the Square Enix one, right? Once you get into Human Revolution, and
yeah,
I think so.
but that's the
Yeah.
one that's the one where I feel like the technical lift like it isn't as far to pull that together as a remaster. So
Yeah, that's Mankind Divided.
divided. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would very much could benefit from an upres and remaster there.
Yeah.
And that's still within, a reasonable generation, like
Right.
26, 13. Yeah.
Yeah. And was Square Enix the publisher on that one?
Yes. On those last two, yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
DBQ,
No.
any strong emotional ties to the Deus Ex franchise? Interest in seeing this come back? I was a huge fan of this on PC at the time. It was kind of my PC rebirth. But how about you?
Yeah, no, I have strong and very emotional ties to digging back through this on PC in the early 2000s. Like, this was a time when you could get like demos and you could burn demos to discs, and I was playing all kinds of demos, and this game was so unique in terms of its systems. And this was pre-Steam. This was, you were launching stuff off of discs, and having the world that it created has created and spawned off a whole different genre in terms of immersive sims. And so I'd love to see what a modern kind of remaster of this looks like that remains true to the story beats, but just kind of amplifies the technical prowess that this game tried to do back in the day.
I think if they didn't do Mankind Divided, I feel like I would want this one to be an actual remake. Like I feel like I would want this one to take everything we've seen in political and sociological history, right, in the time intervening, and like respin the premise to something more modern and something that you could platform off of, right, to a near future scenario.
Yeah, this is not just a simple kind of night dive remaster. This is
Yeah.
very let's take this and make it relevant for 25 years later.
Yeah, and I'd want them to have a greenfield to do it in, right? I think this one would be too constrained in an effort to remaster it by like the past technology, and so I think a remake would be more interesting, but I would take either.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what happens. So before we jump on to our next news story, I want to also hit on just a quick news story that drew my attention back in 24 years later, right, is the Halo, the Spartan Survivor story that spun out of, it's an indie dev that is doing basically a Vampire Survivor type of game within the Halo franchise. And the Halo Studios and Microsoft gave it a nod, and right now it's on itch.io. I've downloaded it. It's supposed to be slated for Xbox and Steam, but as we're talking about games that are 25 years old, if we think about the original Combat Evolved, which launched in 01, we're coming on that beat as well. So it's fun to see Halo and what was 343 Studios and Microsoft be open to kind of fan projects in the midst of all their other news that's surrounding them over the last couple of weeks.
And of course, we might be getting something in the Halo franchise next year for the anniversary, right?
As that is what possibly Phil Spencer hinted at during the showcase. So, but let's keep our focus turned on early, late 1990s and early 2000 franchises as we jump from Deus Ex to Halo and now into Resident Evil.
Yeah, so this news story over on IGN by Tom Phillips. For the first time in over a decade, Resident Evil Requiem will return to franchise's original overarching narrative featuring Raccoon City and Umbrella. Resident Evil Requiem will feature a return to the series' overarching narrative begun 30 years ago, Capcom has said, following the launch of more recent games such as Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village, which focus on events set elsewhere with fewer connections to past titles. Requiem not only features the return of Raccoon City, but will also apparently pick up on the current status of the shadowy Umbrella Corporation. The last we heard of that, the company had gone bankrupt, but is it back now somehow, or did it ever really go away? And so this news story is fed a little bit by a post over on the PlayStation blog, but also, I believe, from the Capcom showcase, which happened last Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, which I did watch. It's really interesting. Probably the biggest things in that showcase people were looking for was more information about Resident Evil, as well as more information about Pragmata. I don't really know that we got that much more information. A lot of the Resident Evil stuff, there were some pieces of interviews with the creative team, with the senior leads of the creative team, and then indications that there was more right off in other reels on the Capcom site, which I have not gone and looked at. But one of the things that was particularly interesting was their feeling that the whole reason why they cast I can't remember the main character's name here. Grace Ashcroft, who is the daughter of Alyssa Ashcroft from Resident Evil Outbreak. But one of the interesting things they said was, well, we didn't, we know people were clamoring for Leon, but we didn't use Leon because Leon's a warrior, right? He's been through this stuff. He's seasoned. He is the equivalent, in my mind, of the movie version of Alice in the Resident Evil series, right? Who by the 6th, 7th movie, right? She's
right. You don't need Mila Jovovich to show up to, take care of everything every time.
Exactly. Like attention. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. If Leon is the in-game equivalent of Mila, he's not going to jump at everything that comes by, right? And that was kind of their point.
Leon has a Monster Hunter a movie to do with his husband. Come on. So
yeah, so I know some people disagreed with that or felt like you could have brought Leon back, like it would have worked. And obviously if you bring Leon back, it's probably less Resident Evil, right? In terms of OG Resident Evil, where there's the surprise and the fear and even the psychological twists of RE7 and Village, in feeling like you're kind of in a The Hills Have Eyes scenario or a Texas Chainsaw Massacre scenario, and it's more of a combat oriented Resident Evil, like Resident Evil 4. So as I always feel with every game, right? Like the people don't become creators because they don't have vision, right? And so it's the right of the creatives, right, to enact and implement their vision of the game, right? And it's the right of us as gamers and consumers to choose to not participate because it isn't what we want, right? It's not our right to yell and scream and shout and about what they should have done or what it should be. So I talked a lot this weekend about the Forza Motorsport series, but also in its relation to Codemasters' Dirt series, which started off as Colin McRae. And we have these franchises that have this TikTok, right? That, in racing games, there's a sim version and then there's a more arcadey version. And so it would be interesting, and I think it would work effectively if Resident Evil went down that path, right? If there was a like Leon, right? Kind of like
Sure,
combat
right.
oriented.
An action versus
Yes.
attention. Yeah.
Yeah, versus pure survival horror kind of thing. And they went back and forth on that. So it'll be interesting to see which way they go. I've been meaning to ask, like, is this a thing? Like, are you a big Resident Evil stan? Is this kind of an automatic given thing that's going to be in your windshield and on your playlist, or is this a wait and see for you?
Oh, I appreciate the Resident Evil lore as someone who has watched all the CGI movies over the course of the years. Um, I like what they do. I really enjoyed 7 a whole lot in terms of its first person and the tension. And if you go back and listen to this podcast, like my freak out playing 7 in VR is still there. Like it still is visceral to me. So the fact that this is going to be first person, that this is not going to be in PS2 VR, or at least right now it doesn't sound like it. I am interested in it. I haven't played 8, but I appreciate this branch of Resident Evil. Like I enjoyed the remakes of 2 and 3, and the PS5 upres of them are very enjoyable. But this kind of tension aspect, playing in 7 and 8 and 9 in the first person, like I'm very curious about this. It's not a day one purchase. It is definitely like I'm gonna look for this as we come into the holiday, and as we come into like it may be a sale purchase, but I appreciate what Capcom and the RE team has been doing. It'll be really interesting because they framed this as the third of a trilogy. And so what comes next? Like they've done this path of first person tension with 7, 8, 9. And now what does 10 look like? And I mean, and I think there's also, potentially at Capcom internal, there is a lot of pressure because you're hitting this Resident Evil 10 mark. So, Nate, do you really want an RE5 remake with all the like colonial aspects and racism that is built into RE5? Like the gameplay of RE5 is actually really solid. Like it was fun to play through with a friend back on the PS3 and 360 days, but like launching that in the year 2026 seems really challenging. I'd love to see them go back and figure out what they actually would tell a story of RE6 and not just this mushy mashup of all their other franchises. But Game Logic, you're queuing up for this RE5 aspect. But Nate, I'm glad to have you here. So thanks for joining the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like, kind of as we've suggested, right, that to me 10 would be the right thing. Like if you're gonna, I often, well, I don't know. I think one of my big gaming regrets is that EA didn't take off with the Need for Speed series in the way that they said that they were, in terms of, they were like, there was a point after like Underground 2 or whatever, that they said, okay, we got it. Like now we're gonna have one version that's like the high stakes, Need for Speed 2, that is like the high stakes European, uber expensive kind of cars in road races and tracks in Europe. And then we're gonna have Underground, and then we're gonna have like the Hot Pursuit, right? And they were like,
this is shortly after they purchased Criterion, right? Like, let's have branches of a franchise, and that feels, that was very much a viable mode back 2 generations ago when games did not cost nearly as much and the investment was not like make or break. But I agree with you. Like I wish that we would have these branches of franchise to give creators a chance to explore.
Yeah, so I feel like the way the timing is working out and kind of where the series is working out, like maybe that's the thing to do is to do bundles of trilogies, right? So you had RE 1, 2, and 3, which is kind of more so in the survival horror vein. You had 4, 5, and 6, which were definitely more, maybe not so much 6, but definitely 4 and 5 more in the combat action oriented vein. And it was more of kind of like a, it was more of kind of like an action movie, right? Than a survival horror.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, 4,
And then
5, and 6. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you had 7, 8, 9, which have been hardcore back to, survival horror, but less of like the monster, right, and more of like the psychological.
Oh yeah. Yes.
So,
less about jump than about tension. Yeah.
Although you've had monsters in there, right, but not, I would say not as fantastical in most aspects, right, for most of the enemies you run into as the zombies of the Umbrella Corporation. And so now maybe the right thing to do is to, after this one, go back to 10, 11, and 12 and have them be, more action oriented. And it's also very interesting to see, I hear what Nate's saying about 5. We always play with this timing of like, because I think some of us were surprised that they did an RE4 remake, right? And we were like, you're kind of getting into that window where now you're hitting games that aren't that old, and like I don't know how much of a lift they're going to get from the remaster, remake, redesign kind of thing. But
I still think like, they haven't done a Code Veronica remake. Like they've hit 2, 3, like and 4, right? But I've missed Code Veronica, which I feel like is, they have the engine. I'd rather see that story than jump into 5 yet, because you're right. Like you could get a graphical enhancement of 5, but in terms of gameplay, it is still very much in this like Gears of War 3 type of cover shooter aspect, which still plays as we're anticipating a Gears of War remaster or whatever the branding is for this third remaster of Gears of War.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting, as it is with all things.
All right. Well, let's keep moving on here. So, Game Logic, Tal's not here to talk about Fortnite. I have been on the road this past week visiting some family, which also means visiting some younger relatives who just want to play Fortnite. So let's turn to the next Fortnite story. After we got, a couple weeks ago, we got through the Apple Fortnite aspect, and now we're into another settlement here, or another resolution of a long time challenge.
Yeah, well, we got through one more jank in the infinite set of switchbacks. That is the Apple Epic case. It's still not over.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, this is so many layers to this. Yeah.
This news story over on Tom's Hardware by Joey Morales. FTC to give 126 million back to Fortnite players who were charged for unwanted items. 950,000 payments refunded, and the deadline to claim your cash was just extended. The Federal Trade Commission announced that it's sending over 950,000 payments, amounting to more than 126 million in total, to U.S.-based players who were charged for unwanted items in Fortnite. The agency says that affected users can file a claim at the FTC Fortnite refunds page until July 9th to get back the money they spent due to Epic Games' use of dark patterns. One of my favorite terms in modern journalism about big tech in the game. This amount is part of the FTC's 245 million judgment against the company finalized in 2023 when it was found guilty of tricking users, especially children, into racking up charges. So let's pause for a minute and kind of talk about what are dark patterns. So dark patterns are UI instantiated workflows that become at some point broken. The loops are recursive. You go down a breadcrumb trail and then can't complete a thing electronically, and then are driven to a point where you either just choose to give up, or where you are forced to call or chat or send in a request, right? And all of these things are digitally oriented, right? And kind of business, if anybody's familiar with business process management notation, and kind of modeling, which is a topic that I had today, around workflows, all of these things are built out in activity and sequence diagrams that are essentially designed to incentivize you to believe that you can't complete them, right? And in some cases, in actuality, are impossible to complete. And so you think about things like, you know, how you are able to sign up for things online, but it's very, very, very difficult to unsubscribe from things online. And fortunately, some things like Xbox Game Pass is a great example of like how you can quickly onboard to it and quickly offboard to it. But then some other things aren't, right? And so I mean, this is one of the things that they're pointing at. I'm not exactly sure how this worked within Fortnite, and or whether or not this is mainly pinned to the kind of Fortnite monthly subscription that you can sign up for that gives you like an automatic set of V-Bucks and content and things like that occur recursively. Or if it's just about like the every other microtransactions. It says all this stemmed from multiple complaints against Epic Games for its use of dark patterns, which made accidental purchases on Fortnite so much easier. It also didn't require parental consent or cardholder confirmation for V-Bucks purchases, meaning children could spend hundreds of dollars on in-game purchases before the parent or guardian discovers that they've been charged. Aside from that, it was reported that the company intentionally hid its cancel and refund buttons to make it harder for customers to reverse these unwanted transactions. And that's an excellent example of dark patterns, right? Meaning that, potentially the cancel and refund buttons were on the screen, but they were buried or they were somewhere out of the core, like center of the person's view in the UI in a way that would lead you to believe that it was impossible to cancel or refund when actually it may have been. So
let's talk about dark patterns here, because Nate just brought up a significant piece of this, is like who this targets in terms of younger users or uninformed parents. So a Nate story around Roblox of charging over 4,200 Robux to a parental account, right? Like, and you don't know this because of part of how it's buried and how the transaction is recorded.
Yeah, and Nate mentions they need to get on Roblox for the same thing. And I know, I don't know if Roblox has court cases, but I definitely know Roblox is under duress from suggestions that, within the digital ecosystem of Roblox, there could be things like, predatory actors who prey on children, like within the game.
Very much so.
And other things.
True.
So, yeah, it's... I won't say too much about like the things you could do to protect yourself, or things that may be prudent, or behaviors you might want to have around these things. I think what's most interesting to me is how, you as an individual will have a perspective on this that is either bound to the instant, or you'll have like a global perspective. And what I mean by that is, you'll look at this and you say, bad on Epic, right, for this isolated event. Or you will look on this and link it to their case with Apple, their very large volume, right, in the media space from Tim Sweeney about how basically every other company is evil except for him. And in the loud volume and voice track that goes along with, hey, we give more money back, right? And then you'll come down on, is Epic really a good actor? And I know that there's a lot of volume, right, and title movements about how Epic is disingenuous, and all of this is really just about swerving revenue in their direction. It's not really about being fair to gamers or developers. And hey, look, yay verily over here is proof of that. So I don't know, DBQ, where do you come down on, is Epic naughty or nice?
I mean, I think in the scheme of comparisons, Epic feels more transparent than a whole lot of mobile developers and Roblox. But I also feel like it is a challenge for younger players and parents. Like, as I spent the weekend with a number of younger family members who Fortnite is the thing they want to play. Um, Fortnite and Roblox, as they sat around at night playing Roblox on their phones, like the awareness of the embedded monetary transactions, and I think that is, it is a challenge. And this is partly because we grew up in an era where things were very transparent. Like, your transactions were first at a retail store and then eventually at one of the few, like, platform holders, whether that be Steam, whether that be a console. But now there are so many other options and so many other availabilities of of connecting a credit card to a simple button click that I'm thankful that as a parent, my kids are old enough that we didn't have to go through that. Like, downloadable content and add-ons were very much a transparent and additional thing in the early 2000s and late, in early 2010s compared to where we are now. So, yeah, Nate talking about thousands of dollars coming out of Roblox, and like, I know that if my kids did that at the time when they were in that elementary school age, I didn't have that disposable income. Like, it would have cleaned my account out, and that's what Nate's talking about here, which is tragic, and it's not a unique story, and I think that's the disappointing thing for the hobby that we enjoy, is that there are predatory actors all across these games.
Yeah, and not to say whatsoever that what you said isn't valid, but it's just that it's such an inlet right into thousands of tributaries that go in like dozens of different directions of things that maybe arguably shouldn't be the way that they are. You kind of think about subscriptions, right? And you can kind of subscribe to kind of microtransactions, right? But the point is that that there's all of these little faucets that are constantly on, right? And maybe they're just running at a trickle, but they're constantly on, right? It's no longer kind of the thing that you mentioned, the model that is oriented around this singular point of sale, um, and then a person in the loop, right, for the next iteration of that, right? It's automated, and so there's definitely, I mean, we're probably definitely mounting in the direction of some major regulatory intervention needing to happen. Like, at some point, some FTC is going to say, you know what? I'm really tired of adjudicating these things onesie twosie every few months. Like, I want policy, right? Because we wouldn't keep having these things if the system wasn't broken in some way. Like, so how is the system broken? And then, of course, at the same time, you have this whole revolution moving in the direction of trying to counter fiat currencies, right? That is that a way to help, or is that a way that in which the problem will get exacerbated? Right? So it's incredibly complex. I feel badly for parents who are growing up in this time having to figure this stuff out. So
Yeah, I think that is the real challenge. Like, you are a parent growing up in this time, but it is also like there's so many, like you said, inlets and tributaries. Like, there is not a clear path for anybody to understand, and we are hooked into this industry, and it is still not nearly as transparent. It is much more predatory than it first was.
Yeah, and I'm a parent who spends a significant amount of my time being a sysadmin in some aspect for family, myself, hobbies, who rules with an iron hand, right? So these are, and not saying that I won't ever have these problems, but these are problems that, like, even if I have them, I have the ability to track them down, right? What is their root? What is the cause, right? And forcibly take action to never permit it to happen again. not everyone is equipped, right, for that. Like you have a very wide diversity of socioeconomic people and education and domain expertise and degree of technical affinity and non-technical, right? And they're all part of this demographic that are parents, right? And you're going to wind up with large buckets of them that are not equipped, right, to deal with these things,
right? And also parents who are good intentioned, as I witnessed this weekend, who want to spend time with their kids playing games together because it's a collaborative social experience. And if their kid is telling them, yeah, this is what we should do, if you are not an informed and heavily informed parent, it makes it really difficult to know what's a reasonable thing to attach a credit card to.
And then even if you're informed, right, then there's also the problem of like which side of the hill do you fall on, right, in terms of like maybe which of the three sides of the hill that you fall on, right, in terms of like, are you a parent who's going to equip your child with a smart device or a phone, and or a phone? Are you a parent who's staunchly against it? And then are you a parent who would like to be against it, but circumstances of life drive you in the direction where you have to? I was listening to
that's a really honest take. Thank you. Yeah. Right. Yeah, go ahead.
I was listening to not this weekend's episode, but the previous episode of This Week in Tech, and one of the panelists on there, a woman who is a writer at The Verge, senior editor at The Verge, mentioned how, look, my daughter got to be a certain age, and then she was into sports, and she was on a travel team, and she was gone like for weekends, like she had to go do stuff. Like, so what am I supposed to do? Am I just supposed to lose contact with her? And I get it. Like, I get Cold War kids, right? We grew up in the eighth grade. We went out at night, we rode bikes underneath the lamppost. We didn't have any kind of, I get it. Like we grew up in the Stranger Things era and everything worked okay. There wasn't some secret US Army base that was growing monsters for the Russians. Like, I get it. Like, but
even short of a secret US Army base, like there wasn't social media and this constant pressure to be engaged. And I think that is a huge challenge for kids these days.
Yeah. So in a modern society, like there are things that you want to do to keep your kids safe, and that sometimes puts you on a slippery slope, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, I think the best we can do is bring attention to these, continue to have the conversation, like bring this awareness out, and hopefully more and more places create this type of awareness, because there's not a clean answer to it, and that's part of the challenge.
Yep.
All right. Well, so I was talking about hanging out with family and younger nieces and nephews, and one of the things I got to be this weekend was the cool uncle who had the Switch 2. And so I could distract somebody from playing Roblox on their phone with this new device. And their first response was, I have this. And until they put it in their hands and realized, oh, wait, this is the Switch 2, not the original one. The bigger display, the different display dimensions. It was a success in terms of providing some distraction and a closed ecosystem around Nintendo. But at the same time, as more of the Switch is out there, we're continuing to hear some conversation around the specs and the reality of it. And so this next news story from Tech Powered Up. Game Logic, you've got it around the questions around the Switch 2's display.
Yeah, so Nintendo Switch 2 slammed for poor display, 120 hertz with 30 frame per second response times by Captain Jank. Despite the Nintendo Switch 2 offering rather modest specifications by today's standards, I think you mentioned DBQ. This is a news story over at Tech Power Up. I want to call that out specifically because it's not a zeitgeist site, but it is a very informative one that people should read. Despite the Nintendo Switch 2 offering rather modest specifications by today's standards, even for a handheld gaming device, it has already broken console sales records with over 3.5 million in sales. we'll skip the opening paragraph. The most notable issue with the Nintendo Switch 2's displays is the response times. Despite having a 120 hertz display, Monitors Unboxed found in its testing that the display achieved an average response time of as high as 33 milliseconds. While testing was conducted at 60 frames per second, the response times even fall short of this low bar, with 16.67 milliseconds being the slowest response time required for pixels to refresh between frames, such as to avoid blur or smearing. Even the original Nintendo Switch manages faster response times with an average of 21.3 milliseconds. I think I'm gonna hold up there. You can read the article with the hyper specifics. I think the two things that I'll mention that this whole thing has caused me to think about is, I'll start with the first. So let's say this is a valid discrepancy. It's super interesting to me in this day and age, and I don't know how everyone deals with it. In that it is feasible for two things to be true. It is feasible for there to be a product that falls short of its promise, while concurrently large numbers of people enjoy it. And so we definitely have these conversation crucibles where we talk about, there's a thing that's a problem, but it doesn't bother anyone. And I don't think it's so much that, and this whole notion of people giving a corporation a pass or anything like that. I think it's literally in a stack of system capabilities and features that may number, let's just call it 36. There's a thing that is less than promised. Do you still find enjoyment of it because of the other 35 things that it does well that meet your needs? I don't know. DBQ, what are your thoughts on that?
No, right? I think there's always going to be compromises. There's never a top end spec a tech spec that does all things for everybody. So, I have been pleased with my experiences with the Switch 2 as somebody, and again, mainly I am going back to playing older games because there's not a whole lot new out for the Switch 2, if you haven't noticed. But, I think that I am not dissatisfied with it, but I am also not running it through kind of its hardcore specs. Nate mentions here in terms of Monitor Unboxed showed the 100 milliseconds. I think that is it has the potential to be an issue down the road. In the short term, it probably is not that much of an issue, but as more and more games, and especially if the Switch 2 thinks that it's going to be a port system, that this refresh rate has, and the display refresh has a potential to create challenges for developers who are looking to port things.
Yeah, it's an interesting quandary because I'm a person who will forever laud the NVIDIA Shield as one of the best set-top streaming devices that's ever been made. And in particular, I am still a personal fan of the first one, not the do-over, right, where they did the Shield Basic that was kind of like a tube, and then the NVIDIA Shield, which is still kind of the weird prism shaped one, similar to the first one, but it's a little bit smaller, but doesn't have the 500 gigabyte SSD in it like the first one did. The first one suffered from some models that had a problem with memory bandwidth, and those things had to be recalled, one of which was mine. I also got into a fight with NVIDIA because they shipped the replacement to the address I lived at when I originally ordered it, not the address that I told them to, and then tried to assert that that wasn't their fault. So we fought, and good on NVIDIA, right? I mean, I know lots of people have lots of hate for NVIDIA. NVIDIA actually trued up and said, nope, after further review, our fault, we'll ship you a new one. But so that was the thing, right? They had to recall those devices, and they did good by consumers and replace them. And of course we had the Red Ring of Death, which Xbox probably arguably did the best thing that they could have with that situation. Although my personal experience was they replaced it 3 times, and the 4th time I said I think I'm done giving you guys a chance to resolve this issue. Including when they replaced it the 4th time, that was the new Xbox 360 Elite that I bought, and it red ring of death also. So I mean, this could be like a display problem that they decide to recall or do something about. I don't know. Yeah, it's so like I said, it's a quandary in this day and age where there are sometimes things we accept because a device does 92% right of what we expect it to do, and we deal with the 8%. It is also very, very interesting, and this is like a market makeup and demographic like question. I was listening to Nintendo voice chat today, um, and I'm interested to get Tao back because I think he amongst us is the one who plays in handheld mode the most, or at least did with the first Switch. Whereas I was a dogmatic docked user who like handheld was the exception. I'm My plan is this time to flip that and to play mostly in handheld mode because you know, I started with the Steam Deck like that, but now I exclusively play with the Steam Deck in handheld mode. I do not play with it docked. I only use docked to take care of installs and things like that. So I haven't had a chance to put the Switch 2 through its paces in handheld mode. But I'm curious to see if he's doing a lot of handheld play and how he feels about it. I mentioned Nintendo voice chat because it sounded like from a lot of them, most of them are playing it in docked mode. They don't play it in handheld unless there was an actual reason for them to be in handheld mode, i.e. they're on travel, right?
Sure, right. I think the allure of finally having a 4K Nintendo system is worth exploring.
So I'm wondering if that will play into this, right? I'm wondering if the addressable market will actually be people who play this largely in docked mode on 4K TVs, and therefore don't experience this issue, right? If it is an endemic issue to the entire right product line, or if it only affects like certain people, and if therefore that will cause less of an outcry about it. The last thing I'll mention, which I kind of didn't want to mention, but I will mention because I'm not trying to discredit hardware unboxed at all. I will say hardware unboxed is in a bucket of tech tubers for me that at least for their podcast, they'll do an episode that is on here's our review of the 9060 of the RX 9060 XT, right? Or the RTX 5060 8 GB, right? And in an hour and a half podcast, instead of me getting a lot of technical information about how the card performs, they will spend 95% of the time about how NVIDIA is handling their partner relationships and interfacing with reviewers. And so they're just like for instance, Steve at Hardware at Gamers Nexus is thought very highly of. I don't watch his videos because his videos are very much oriented around calling corporations out and like declaring them like morally bankrupt, and that's fine. Like I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying for me and the information
It's views. Yeah.
I'll read the review. I'll read the written review because I want to see the specs of the benchmark. Like I don't want to see. I don't need all of the other stuff. So where this sits with me comes through a filter where I'm like not skeptical, but I'm cautious until I see more information. Right? This is not quite along the lines of the liquid metal problem in the PS5 issue topic, which has been running around since 2021, reared its head again in 2023, and is back again in 2025. And every time I pull the thread on it, like I can't find enough objective evidence to tell me that it's something as significant as like the red ring of death, right? So I guess we'll see, and we'll monitor the situation and see how big it plays and see where it lands, right? It's just it's a tough thing to see through the thickets, for me personally right now.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is nearly at a red ring spec, in terms of an issue in terms of hardware. It certainly is a concern for people looking at the high end, but I think for a lot of users, it may not even be something that registers with them. And to Barappa and Nate, who talked about asked about whether Nintendo has commented, and Nate said they haven't. That is absolutely correct, and I would be shocked if they do. Like, it would take hardware failures for Nintendo to actually comment on something versus just let it ride. I think that is not a surprise from Nintendo as a company at all. So,
yeah, I mean, and this is the company that, even though they had the Joy-Con problem the first time around, rolled this thing out without Hall effect joysticks or TMR joysticks, right?
Well, and even when they knew they had joystick problems the first time, it took them 2 years to be able to acknowledge that they were going to service them for free. So, yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all that Nintendo's quiet about this one. So,
yep.
All right, Game Logic, let's round the corner here. Let's take the last 15 minutes to dive into our final segment of what else we've been playing. We've got lots going on. It is summertime. It is the Steam sale. There are all kinds of other sales going on. But so I'm going to hit two quick games here. One is Clutchtime. Clutchtime is a card-based game. It is by the developer. It is Bigosaur, which doesn't have a great track record of games looking on Steam. Things like Crypto Miner Tycoon Simulator and Son of a Witch and Windmill Kings and a variety of kind of cheap looking games. But Clutchtime is a game that's coming out in July. There is a release out right now. It's a kind of limited. It's not. There was a demo, but this is kind of a limited game. Clutchtime is a card-based basketball game that you are playing. Kind of, it is graphically not super fancy. You have all kind of silhouettes on your cards, but you are going through a game quarter by quarter and turn by turn. You've got, it's a card-based battler, so you've got a series of stamina points, and some, like a 3-point shot may take 3 stamina points, but if you do a pass for 1 stamina point, the next basket you shoot is worth 0 stamina points. So you can start to chain together things, but you're also playing defense, and so you don't want to simply be trying to score constantly. You want to be also setting up steals and blocks, which hold over into your opponent's turn. And it's right now it's computer based, like you're playing against PvE. It certainly seems like it has the potential to be a PvP type of battler, but it's really kind of enjoyable in terms of thinking about basketball as a round by round strategic interaction of setting up both offensive plays, and not just big plays, but like drives to the basket and fast breaks, but also putting up blocks and steals for the opponent's next turn. So as I played it, it's actually really enjoyable. There's not a whole lot to it in terms of, there's more to it in terms of layers of strategy, but in terms of like presentation, it's relatively straightforward. But as a combination of a card-based strategy game and a sports fan, it's actually really enjoyable. So I'm going to keep my eye on it. I'm going to keep playing some of the demo here to get a better understanding of its depth. But it releases in mid-July. So as we turn the corner from June into July, it's definitely something on my indie focus. My second game that I picked up just at the end of this week, I have been kind of aware of it over the past couple weeks. And then this week, over on gamesindustry.biz, there was a feature article June 24th from Lewis Packwood around the game Evermore Ascensions. So Evermore was a game that was created by a number of former Riot developers that came out of League of Legends. Evermore did an early access and kind of soft launch about 2 years ago as a kind of a traditional MOBA. Like they were trying to launch it as a mobile game and online only and PvP with a little bit of additional PvE aspects in there, and trying to build it around a strong community. You know, the GameIndustry.biz article talks about it as trying to be a more accessible, more inviting community than League. Again, given that two of the big developers of this came from Riot, they knew kind of the onboarding ramp challenges that were there. And so 2 years ago, it did not really resonate. It didn't, it had some fans in its early access and its beta, but did not necessarily really resonate as highly as they hoped. And also that came about the time that as we've talked about here plenty of times, like the capital investments and the speculation and investments of putting money into games coming out of COVID and that kind of steep drop off that we saw. So it's been probably about a year ago or so that the developers laid off a significant chunk of their staff and retooled this game to be Evermore Ascension. And so it takes the kind of hero-based characters of a MOBA in terms of you got your attacks, you've got multiple different kind of power attacks that have a timer, but throws them into a action RPG, throws them into a Diablo-like. And so I've been playing around with this just a little bit, haven't played too much yet. Right now it's got some heavily negative reviews on Steam because it's still in early access. It just kind of launched, but I think the idea of it is really interesting, and I'm curious to see kind of where it goes. So those are the two of my kind of indie hits for the week. Game Logic, before we move over to you, do you have any questions as you pull up your microphone?
No, I don't. Sorry, not out of lack of interest, but just because I'm keeping an eye on our time.
Yeah, exactly. So I've still got Forza Motorsport 6 installed on my Xbox. So what made you reinstall it?
One, I don't own the new Forza Motorsport. I had that in Game Pass, was how I was accessing that before, and so I don't have access to it now. And I was kind of looking to, like I said, obviously I recently purchased an Xbox Series X, and a huge racing fan, huge fan of this series overall, and so it was either buy the new Forza Motorsport, which I didn't really want to do. It's still not getting particularly great user community reviews on Steam, or install Forza Motorsport 7 or Forza Motorsport 6. And so I'm definitely in kind of like a high experimentation time on consoles, because most of the new releases for those consoles I have on PC. And so I've been spending a lot of time going kind of back through my backlog. I'm really impressed how well Forza Motorsport 6 has held up over time. In particular, the sound, I think, is the thing. The audio design in this game is just great. I used to own a Ford Mustang Mach 1, which just had this great throaty guttural roar when it started up with its 315 horsepower engine. And this is similar. So the last two series I've played in this game, I've played using the American Muscle Car class. So I've driven this. I've been driving a Ford Mustang 502 custom job, and so in here I'm driving the 1970 something Corvette Stingray. Unfortunately, the Forza Motorsport 6 servers have been cut off, which I knew, and I knew that would impact multiplayer, which I wasn't too concerned about. But it turns out that the other thing that it impacts is um, the skins and design shop where you could download skins is no longer available. I am not a great skin designer, and so I definitely lean very heavily on the community to design skins, which is one of the downfalls of the current Forza Motorsport. I haven't checked it out recently, but in its initial few months of launch, however that design shop worked was just something that the design community found unappealing, and so there were not tons of designs for cars. In past iterations of Forza Motorsport, typically you go to a car and try and arm a skin, and you're presented with like 20 options, right? And then typically there's more than that. It's just you're served up the first 20. So, but regardless, as far as the physics engine, as far as the audio design, as far as the tracks, I mentioned, like I said on another show this week, that I love street and circuit racing. I love this far more so. I mean, I enjoy the Forza Horizon series, and I've enjoyed the journey right from Australia to Britain to Mexico, and doing a new locale right every iteration of Forza Horizon. But I really love street courses. And I'm in love with motorsports, and I love Formula One and MotoGP and World Superbike, and so hitting these courses that many of which are, most of which are real world. I don't think this course is real. This is supposed to be a course in Sweden, which I don't think is a real course, but there are many, Silverstone and Brands Hatch and Donington and Spa-Francorchamps and the Nürburgring Formula One circuit, the closed circuit, not the big long route thing that used to be in, PGR 3 and 4, and Catalunya and Road Atlanta, like Sebring, Long Beach. Like I love all of those courses, and they're well worn. I've been racing them for 20 years, right, in different iterations. So I love getting back to them. So yeah, I've just been having a blast in Forza Motorsport 6, and it plays great on the Xbox Series X.
Yeah, I agree. It really does. Like I keep mine installed because of the NASCAR aspect of it, and even though I'm not, I appreciate driving and the variety that it entails. But I'll talk about this more next week because we're short of time. But over the past 3 weeks at this point, every week I'm coming back to Forza Motorsport because they're in their kind of anniversary celebration. So you get some tracks from 1, 2, 3. I think they're up to 5 at this point. So yeah, I'll definitely talk about more about that next week. But I think, over the course of the last 20 years, as you said, like there's a lot of really solid racing that Turn 10 has created.
And this is the 2023 version that you're saying you're going back to?
Yes. Yeah. The most recent one has in their kind of special, feature races that they have highlights from each of the previous iterations as part of an anniversary celebration.
Okay, very cool.
So yeah, if you haven't picked up or haven't had a reason to come back to Forza Motorsport 23, the anniversary celebration is kind of a cool way to go back and relive some of the classic courses within the new engine.
Yeah, and if you're going to pick that up on Steam, it has been on sale and has gone on sale pretty frequently. I think at last check it was like 50% off. I think on sale for like $29.99. So it wouldn't surprise me for discounts to cut deeper here going into the future. So I'm pretty sure it's something that I have wish listed. I think I just haven't pulled the trigger on it yet.
Yeah, it looks like right now in the Steam sale that up until July 10th, that it is $35 for the base edition.
Yeah.
All right, you've got one more JRPG to hit us back with in terms of your continuing progression through Shin Megami.
Yeah, so yeah, on the PS5 Pro, I have gone back to Shin Megami Tensei. I always love how Twitter defaults to 360p. I have been going back to Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, and I tell you, like, what an experience to come back to the game that kind of trained me so that my onboarding to Clair Obscur Expedition 33 was not as harsh as it might have been. And now coming back to Shin Megami Tensei 5, which, you know, I lost access to when, you know, during the year that I'd gotten rid of my PlayStation 5, and now coming back to it, it's super interesting, right? To revisit in hindsight after finishing Expedition 33 kind of the similarities and the differences, right? And so there are similarities in the Luminas from Expedition 33 with kind of the divinations or the divine powers in this game, because both of those kind of work as this passive power that's armed in Shin Megami Tensei. They're armed at the party level. So they are buffs that impact the whole party. Luminas are armed individually in Expedition 33, but they do kind of become universally available to the entire party. So some of them will work at the party level if you equip them that way. But Shin Megami Tensei has the whole like demon fusing and essence fusing mechanic to it as well. And so as you build your army and talk to demons and negotiate with them to join your party, you can also grab powers of theirs and equip them to other demons, or equip them to yourself, or actually fuse multiple, two demons together to get a unique output. So, I've been going through and like using my army to, and there's a cost to that, right? In terms of like you decrement the total size of your available army when you do things like that, right? They reduce in number, but you may get more powerful combinations out of them. And so I've been really, I think my big focus as I've been going back through it is kind of developing like these new kind of rules of engagement of how I'm going to work through progression and how I'm going to work in battles. Whether or not I am going to use general attacks in order to kind of conserve my mana, when I'm going to go through, and apply kind of my power based attacks in an effort to quickly kind of attrite the enemy, whether or not I'm going to guard and try and get the enemy and goad the enemy into using a lot of their mana so that they're reduced to kind of basic attacks. But then also kind of coming up with paradigms of like how I'm going to fuse demons and utilize essences, right? How, I'll pick two demons to look at pairs, but I'm only going to fuse them if the resulting demon has a higher hit point count than either of the other two demons. So I'm just kind of working through all these paradigms and frameworks and, like I said, rules of engagement, and KPIs, right, that I'm going to use as my thumb rules of like how exactly you're going to progress through the game. I talked about earlier this weekend, in Death Stranding 2, but also like in Ubisoft games, how that's such a big part for me of extracting enjoyment out of a game. That's like you have to decide the kind of rules engine that you're going to use to go through it, so that you don't become the victim of the default and the distraction veil, right? Of like just doing things willy-nilly and not really thinking through it, and spending a lot of time doing things that maybe aren't your best. Like I've been trying to teach myself today to not use power attacks on demons when they are less than 30 hit points, right? Because at that point I may as well just use a regular attack and not spend the mana on it. So it's been interesting, great re-onboarding to it and going through the story. It's a weird, funky story, but it's great, in terms of both its mechanics and the story that it's kind of weaving.
Well, I will speak for Swiss, who would love the fact that you are continuing on with a JRPG and appreciating it. But I think you're right. Like the connective tissue of what Clair Obscura does, and all of the kind of highlights and evolutions that it is successful in, also are nice kind of callbacks to a variety of other games over the course of the genre. So it's great to be able to experience that and have an appreciation for that based on kind of a reimagining that Clair Obscura did. All right, Game Logic, we have hit well past our 90-minute mark. So we've got if you're in America, we've got the July 4th holiday weekend coming up here, which potentially means you are out of the office and away from home, or maybe you just get a chance to play some more video games. Looking at the significant releases of the week, you've got Mecha Break here as the one. As I look through the rest of the Steam releases, there wasn't a whole lot more popping out to me. Anything else on your radar?
No, I mean there's some smaller stuff, right, that definitely warrant some interest. There's some racer that's out on Xbox under their id at Xbox program, which I forget the name of, but that might be worth kind of pulling the thread over at Xbox Wire to see what that is. I think the tail of the tape is more so the rest of this month, which we kind of often revisit kind of in the last week of the month, first week of the month. I don't have the list pulled up, but you obviously have DK Bonanza coming out later this week. You have Eric's Home, which is a big game that I have loved when it showed at Summer Game Fest over the last couple of years. That is out, I think, mid-July. I mentioned earlier this weekend how it's really a good time to, if you made a watch list, right, out of all the events at Summer Game Fest, what you probably picked up on is, just like last year, how so many things got announced that are this year. And in cases filled in the release slate for things right in our windshield, like in July and August and September. So it's definitely a good time to go back and revisit those and look at what you have wish listed and make sure that you caught the release date. I mean, there are things like Sword of the Sea is coming out, I think, in August. College football comes out this month. That was when you were beta testing. Yep. So when is that out?
It comes out, I think if you are in the kind of upper tier, it's July 10th, and then you get 3 extra days. But yeah, it's coming out in 2 weeks in the middle of July. Yeah, there's, we get a slow trickle. There's not nearly as kind of big releases, but there's definitely a good slow trickle of things continuing to come out.
Yeah, and it's not specific to July, but again, in that notion of going back through your watch list, Final Fantasy Tactics is out the end of September. So
yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, that's not even our backlog list, right? Like, we both have plenty, as you talked about playing Forza Motorsport 6. There's plenty of good stuff out on our backlogs, and there's summer sales going on, whether you're on the eShop or on Steam. There is a good amount of games that you can be picking up on the short, the short end of your bank account. So, all right, Game Logic. Thanks for the conversation, Nate, Hero Down Under, Brap. Thank you all for joining us. Everybody else who had a chance to stop through, we really appreciate your comments and your conversation. We are glad to have you here. And we'll hope you come back and join us again next week. We'll be back again next Sunday evening, as we always are, until one of us gets sick or 6 of us get sick and there's nobody left to podcast. So, but until then, this has been episode 393 for the week of June 29th. I have been your host, DBQ Hams. Game Logic, thanks for joining me. Next week, we'll be back with, we'll see who's here, but I'm sure we'll have plenty of news to talk about, plenty of games to talk about, and we are glad to have you join us. So whether you are joining us live or listening to us in the week in between, come on back every Sunday evening. We are here, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Glad to have you as part of our conversation. So for myself, DBQ Hams, and Game Logic, this has been episode 393. So until next week, play the games you love those you play with, and be kind to yourself. Good night, everybody.